Okay, this is a 2023 article, which like blew my mind a bit, even though I knew, having worked in e-commerce before, that this was somewhat true. I just didn't know to the degree upon which it was true. Amazon found, the headline says it all, right? Amazon found every 100 milliseconds of latency cost them 1% in sales. That's wild. More than 10 years ago, that's 10 years ago, Amazon found that every 100 milliseconds of latency cost them 1% in sales. In 2006, Google found an extra 0.5 seconds in search page generation time dropped traffic by 20%. A broker could lose $4 million in revenues per millisecond if their electronic trading platform is 5 milliseconds behind the competition. Now, I want you to consider, sure, you could make a case like, these are old. Who's making like software for trading platforms, etc.? You know what, folks? Imagine for a moment that a bad state actor or just an entire country tomorrow decided to kick off World War III. And a vast majority of the battles fought in World War III are based on technology. Therefore, software. Who do you think is going to immediately forego any amount of stupid bullshit in order to get to the most performant, most efficient software or hardware or both that they can possibly get in order to have an edge in a global war or even in a war of just two countries? So it actually is important, because when shit hits the fan, all this fluff about, oh, but look at my libraries and my developer experience though, and all that bullshit, it means nothing. And you can see that play out in real life where things down to the millisecond are that important and cost millions of dollars. And there is nobody who's going to say, oh, but if we add 60 libraries to your electronic trading platform, imagine what we can do when the developers can just pick a library off the shelf and their developer experience feels good and they can feel good building it. No one gives a shit because $4 million per millisecond is on the line. Stocks, I can see everything else. I'm pretty sure it's hypothetical being presented as factual. Not with e-commerce. Not with e-commerce, Arvis. E-commerce is like one of the most realistic places where you can get like real world data about like the most mundane crap, and you can have a dramatic hit in costs over something that is like, yeah, I've been in rooms where I'm adding a library on an e-commerce site that adds a few milliseconds of latency, and the tech lead and business are like hounding me on why I need to do that, because their conversion rate is known to drop, which means that their income rate is also known to drop. Like, and you're selling like the most mundane stuff. This does have real world impacts on stuff that like doesn't really matter that much. Real-time algorithmic trading. It is speed competition. Yeah, Bogan, yeah. This is true of online casino games, by the way. About 20% drop off users per second that it took to load before there was something to interact with. Travis, yeah. I think it's a more complicated conversation than that. Drop in traffic is not a drop in sales. It's a hypothetical drop in sales, but that assumes there was going to be a sale in the first place. Arvis, that's not true. Tell me you haven't worked in e-commerce without telling me you haven't worked in e-commerce. Listen. Listen. You bastard, okay, you ignorant bastard. Let me school you on the ways of e-commerce, Arvis. At the ripe old age of 40. No, listen, this is how it works. There is a sales funnel. There's a sales funnel that starts with traffic that has to come in. You have to have traffic in order to convert. a drop in traffic is a necessary loss in conversion and sales. And that is based on the premise that you do nothing else to adjust to tweak your conversion, but you do something to tweak your traffic, your drop, increase, or sustainability in traffic. So traffic and conversion remain the same as long as you're not changing both of them, right? So you could, for example, have 100 people and you know that your percentage of conversion is 1%, right? So, but it's dependent on having a particular amount of traffic, because before they get to the conversion rate, they have to go through a series of processes, and it's not a straight one-to-one. That drop off of traffic, that income of traffic has a drop off even before they convert. And the fewer number of people you have in the initial income of traffic means that they're more likely to also drop off, thus narrowing your band in between point A and point B. So you can't look at it as just purely income of traffic to pure conversion rates. There's an entire set of steps that go on in between, and that income of traffic is not the same income of traffic that's left over when they convert. But not all of that traffic is going to convert, so it's Schrodinger's in equation. It's never going to be 100%. It will never be 100%, right? But when you have enough data at the e-commerce level, you have enough data to understand what the amount of traffic equals to the amount of conversion. And that generally doesn't change unless you have a dramatic change in your traffic numbers. That's not always the case, but it's generally the case, because you can generalize those numbers and you have lots of numbers to go by. E-commerce tracks numbers like crazy. Okay, since these data points were published, our digital world has accelerated exponentially. COVID-19 changed the way we do business. Enterprises that did not have an online presence or offered a poor online experience fought to survive. It is clear that the need for speed and scale have escalated dramatically. Enterprises need to understand how they can support current and future apps to remain competitive in all aspects: optimized operations, regulation adherence, and enhanced customer experience. Consumerization has also heavily impacted our expectations of our online experience. It is a given that customer-facing services need to offer a sublime experience to remain competitive. But as digital modernization has ramped up, internal stakeholders and organizations expect the same ease of use and intuitivity that they get as consumers. I'm going to be honest here. These 3 paragraphs are a bunch of word salad. I barely got what they're trying to say. Holy shit. Digital services are driven by data, not any data that can be delivered to apps continuously in real time, so that the info customers get and the transactions they carry out can be executed in seconds. Below are some stats that drive home the connection between the cost of low latency for the user experience and how it translates into revenue, or conversely can lead to loss of revenue. Ooh, this is good. I'm not arguing the part that faster apps are for the best generally, but the claims by mega corporations to say, oh, we're losing money is pretty much BS. They're losing impulse sales or hypothetical conversion rates that, as the article even says, make up 1% of sales. Arvis, not true at all. I have worked in very small companies in the e-commerce space where their conversion rates drop at equivalent levels of bigger companies. The factor of scale does play, but it is as important to small companies as it is to big companies. A 100 millisecond delay has a different factor of scale impact to a big company potentially, but by no means will either a small company or a big company, at least in my experience, look at a small look at their small window of what a 100 millisecond delay looks at and go, it's not a big deal. No, it's a big fucking deal. Fast forward to 2023, 70% of mobile app users will abandon an app if it is taking too long. 70% of mobile app users will abandon an app 70%. Hey, Dead Robot. Got a dip and sleep, but glad I caught this. Been on auto recently at work, enterprise junior dev, but I'm so excited about stuff like this. Pursuing better web software. Looking forward to your research. Thank you, Dead Robot. I appreciate it. Have a good night, man. 53% of your site visitors will leave if your site takes longer than 3 seconds to load. That is damning. Imagine counting to 3 before a site loads. Since Amazon first talked about latency in seconds and milliseconds, the situation hasn't gotten any easier for online retailers. In the era of high-speed internet, user experience is even more critical to e-commerce success than it was in the past. According to Advertising Week, satisfied customers are more likely to spend up to 140% more and recommend companies to others when they feel valued and appreciated. That is huge because that is free advertising. Latency is not an option anymore. The less interactive a site becomes, the more likely users are to simply click away to a competitor's site. Latency is the mother of interactivity. Additionally, as enterprises start leveraging real-time analytics for personalized recommendations and dynamic pricing services, speed is becoming even more imperative. How do we recover that which is most meaningful? Yada, yada, yada. In a great example can be seen from a customer of ours, PriceRunner, who has designed their architecture to flexibly and quickly scale out when necessary without compromising performance and speed. This past Black Friday, when visitor traffic peaked at 20 times higher, in parallel with 100 million price updates, PriceRunner response time for the 95th percentile of the product page endpoint remained within the 5 to 8 millisecond range. Faster time to purchase button, less time to think twice and save your money, pretty much. If I load X and a new page takes 5 seconds for actual content to appear. Yeah, Boken, X for some reason tends to be slow for me too. I mean, obviously brainless impulse shopping is a big thing to take advantage of, but to call that a loss of sale, I think is disingenuous. No, it's not a loss of sale, Arvis. You're jumping ahead. There's a reason why they call it conversion. Because it does not necessarily have to mean that it's a sale. It could mean any number of things that surround a sale. So for example, you could have someone who puts a bunch of products in the cart and never purchases at that moment. That's not a sale. That's a conversion. That person is far more likely to come back and complete their cart than not. But that's called a conversion. You can have somebody who joins an email list so that you can sell them stuff down the road, which is a future down the road sale. So they might put their name on an email list because they like the product or whatever, and they want to know about stuff that's coming up. They're not interested in any of your current products, but they are interested in your future products. The traffic portion has already been counted. The conversion portion has been counted because they have taken an action that makes them more likely to turn that into like income. So conversion is not always about the sale at that moment. The conversion is about the likelihood that they are going to buy. And the less traffic you have, the less likely people are going to be to take those conversion-based actions that make them more likely to actually turn into cash sales. It's not the same thing. And conversion rates are the biggest factor that they're like the one step removed from the amount of potential income and likely income that you can kind of count on as you do long-term forecasting on your business. So conversion, traffic, then conversion, then actual cash sales are usually like, there's a few other things, but they're commonly like the 3 anchor points that tell you how well your site is doing at any given moment. So it's not about the sale itself, it's about the likelihood of the sale. And you can't have a likelihood of someone buying if they're going to drop off your website in the first 3 seconds, for example. if your site takes 1 to 3 seconds to load on good internet, what is it going to do on a mobile device on LTE network with 2 bars? Yeah, very common scenario. Yeah. I can tell you even where I live, if I drive 5 minutes from my house, I can find an area with this type of cell service, and I've seen it take a full minute to load Amazon on that network. I've experienced the same. And I'm in like a big metropolitan area, and there are places where it's like it's stupid to load Amazon. Okay, so this was actually good. I think the key things here are like right here. Those are critical. It's just framing of the conversation. I would rather sell things that people actually need, but I'll stop hijacking the conversation. That's a different argument though, Arvis. Like, the point, we're not arguing about whether Amazon is selling things that people actually need. We're arguing about what impact does traffic drop off have on income. So for my argument that it's important to focus on quality and good code, it goes to my argument, right? It goes to that argument. If you want to make the argument that people don't need to be buying stuff off Amazon, that's different. No, I don't think they're related at all. Why is it related that, wait, you have to look at it in a vacuum. Even if people are buying things they don't need, it matters that you produce quality code so that you can get to a point where they make that purchase. My argument would be when we produce crappy code, generally speaking in the IT industry, it has long-term consequences, including economic ones. I don't see why what you sell defeats that argument. It's two separate things.